So welcome back. Hello, Lars. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well.
And
Hi, Reinhold.
And congratulations on the event so far. It's really very exciting. I learned a lot. So great job for everybody.
Thanks so much. That was our intention. And in fact, I think all of us, we learned a lot. So yeah, and it's really, really thrilling, well, to what size our ecosystem has already grown.
And it's exciting to listen to the people with the passion they're talking about the topic, how precise they are, how they're well informed they are. I think really, really very impressive. Congratulations to everybody here.
Yeah, so we have a great team here, and we have a great ecosystem with IDSA, with our members and partners, and well, that's really, really great and fun. Yeah, so Tim, good afternoon. Chris, good afternoon. Good to have you on stage. Yeah, so I'm here to just introduce all of you, and Reinhold, you will guide us through the through this session. And yeah, it's 5 minutes past. So good afternoon, everyone. So we are still in the flow of mobility, so that's what it's all about in mobility, right? So the next session on mobility, this time we will learn on more about mobility cases, and especially about the mobility data space. So this big German endeavor, it's Datenraummobilität in German, so mobility data space. And well, I'm more than happy, and well, I do feel honored that we have, well, really the front runners of the mobility data space in Germany here on stage. And yeah, so we are waiting for Karl-Heinz Streibich. There he is. So very good that you're with us. It's a incredible honor to have you here, to welcome you on IDSA Summit. Tim Wiegels from FreeNow, also from the ecosystem, Chris Langdon from Deutsche Telekom, and Reinhold Achatz. So he's the chairman of the board of IDSA, and well, he's in fact really igniting data spaces and data sharing ecosystems, well, in Europe. And well, therefore, for me, it's an honor to have you here, and it's a pleasure to hand over to you, Reinhold, to guide us through this session. The stage is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lars. Thank you much for the introduction. And I think I will basically give a short introduction what you will talk about in the next 50 minutes. Basically, my intention is to give a short introduction on the mobility data space. Then obviously, to make it really understandable, easy to understand, we will show our first use case, and this Tim will do. And then obviously, as Lars already said, it's an honor and a pleasure to have Karl-Heinz Streibich with us, who is the president of Acatech, and he will explain to us why Acatech choose IDS for the mobility data space. And then we will have a discussion, Chris, with you, and I think you were already on stage, and hopefully Sebastian, basically about the community you're talking about. And I hope at the end we have the opportunity to discuss a little about what we heard before. So basically, what I want to do is basically describe how everything started. And I think everything started on one hand in Germany, but on the other hand, we are talking about a European endeavor. Because the European Commission proposed to establish 9 common data spaces in February 2020. And as you see, there's an industrial data space, a Green Deal data space, health, financial, energy, agriculture. data space for public administration, skills data space, and a mobility data space they propose. And obviously, this is what we intend to talk about. The only thing I do not agree with the European Commission is basically that they talk about 9 data spaces. My personal opinion is that we will see many more data spaces, and if you ask me to give a number, I would talk about hundreds, if not thousands, of data spaces we will see in the future. So we will definitely have an ecosystem of data spaces, and mobility data space is just the start of it. And why do I believe so? Because obviously we are creating a new paradigm with data spaces, because obviously so far we have classical platforms from the classical hyperscalers, and they create data lakes. This means they collect all the data, put it in their data lake, then and everybody is losing ownership of the data, and there's a central storage. And the paradigm of data spaces is totally different. It's really an approach, a federated storage, so data stay at the owner, and the owner keeps ownership of it and is sharing it under certain conditions. And the big difference is really that so the hyperscalers always getting the most benefit out of it, and for us it's very important that the real data owner is getting the benefit out of it. And the structure of the data space, I think for the IDS colleagues, it's very well known. Basically, we have obviously the space, data space, the connector is connecting everybody with a data space. We have a broker, a catalog, basically, where you can space, we have a clearing service, a locking service, we have a vocabulary, we have an identity, and obviously we have an app store. So this is basically the same as it will be in future for all data spaces. So the mobility data space is a blueprint for all the future data spaces we will see. And the difference to some of the other examples you saw today is as well that it's really a data space where you can go in and step in. Obviously, you have to have the certification, and you have to be basically invited to the data space. But as soon you're in, you can freely trade your data without any limitations. And to provide basically value, we are defining use cases. There will be B2B, business-to-business use cases, but as well B2C use cases, because eventually, obviously, the end user has to benefit. And as I think to demonstrate how this may work, I asked Tim Wiegels now to present his presentation because he is coming from FreeNow, and FreeNow is the organization which really was implementing the first use cases. There's only one first, and this is the first we have in the mobility data space, FreeNow, and Tim Wiegels. And Tim, the floor is yours, and I unshare my slides.
At first, thanks for having me. Let me just share my slides now, and I think there's a nice way just to do the one tap. Go. Cool. Presentation mode. So I will talk about the first use case we implemented. I'm Tim. I'm the Vice President Data at FreeNow. And just one or two words about FreeNow. FreeNow, I think almost everyone in Europe will still know us under the name MyTaxi back then. So the first big taxi app in Europe, and now available under FreeNow in almost every European market, some Latin American markets. And in addition to taxi, we also now do e-scooters, e-mopeds, normal mopeds, e-bikes, and car sharing. This is also where this whole weather data thing becomes very, very interesting for us, because obviously not all of these mobility solutions work well in every weather. But let's go into this story. So the first thing actually was the DRM, so the Datenraummobilität, the German data space for mobility, where we, and this is me and Jenny, our PA, who works very closely with me on all these things, got involved to do this very early. Why? Because at first for us it's very interesting, any kind of data sharing, to be involved in this very early, because it's important, it needs to be done, and if it needs to be done, I always like to be, well, very close to the way it's decided needs to be done. And what we discussed a lot was how can we actually use this Datenraum or this data space in a very, very good way. And the first thing we actually did was do something like this. So we brainstorm what could be done, what could be a good use case to actually start off with, something that is not massively, what's the word? massively difficult to work on and very easy to understand. And for us, it was obviously something like, we need weather data. I mean, there was always something I thought in the company that weather data might be quite important for us. I mean, especially if you look at the taxi already, that is really, really interesting as well. But when you look at cities like Hamburg or Berlin, we are quite large. So there will be areas where it's raining cats and dogs. Obviously, we need more cars there. And even nowadays, it becomes even more important because for scooters, for example, really rainy weather isn't that great. So I'm not sure whether any of you has used an e-scooter in rainy weather. I can tell you I did this once in Berlin, and it's quite good if you can jump off the e-scooter when it's very wet on the floor, because this is what you should do at some point. So what we did was actually sit together and decide, well, the DWD, which is the Deutsche Wetterdienst or the German Weather Forecast Service, has interesting data for us. And that's also there in a very good resolution. So daily information, whether there's a weather warning or no weather warning, and that's something we wanted. So we worked on actually being able to ingest this data via the Datenraum into our, well, what we call here the DWD weather service. That's actually just how this, data source is called in our system. And then it's actually quite easy. So we get this data ingested every 4 hours. We use Brace, which is a CRM tool, or just in very layman's terms, if you open your app or if your app does something, that's where these notifications come from. So the notifications are actually coming from Brace, which is a nice tool for that. And we just feed this data into Brace, and then given certain prerequisites, we will put out notifications in the app. And that's actually all of it. Obviously, there's also a lot of more stuff in there. We also try to get this data in the data warehouse because the weather data is also interesting for us to check what happened, why did we not have enough tours, is there something with weather, how weather influences the system. So there's a lot of stuff where data analysis and in the future also machine learning will come into play. But right now it's mainly this. And we have 2 different ways to do this. And then it's really easy. The user opens our app nowadays. The app knows where the user is. So you're in Hamburg, you're in Berlin, you're in also many other European cities in the future, and sends this information to Brace. Brace then requests the weather data from our service we already have there according to city, day, and hour, and sends an in-app message. And it looks like for the user it's actually also quite easy. It just looks like this. So I hope you can all see the video. Let me check on the other screen quickly. Yeah, that looks good. So if you're in Hamburg, for example, the weather is not awesome quite often. So what we propose to the user, I just stopped this very quickly. Sorry for the German, I also show you the English version after this, is that the weather isn't great. So right now we know the weather is going to be bad. The weather is going to be very wet, rainy. And then we propose to the user, well, it's not awesome. It might be more secure if you don't take a scooter, but take a taxi or a car sharing car. And this is actually what happens. If you then click on one of these 2, it just brings you directly to the tab for car sharing. So you can just use car sharing and rent a car, which we also have for miles and in future also from other providers. Wait a sec. Why doesn't this go on? Now, yeah, so the user opens the app and goes to the scooter tab, and then the weather in that location has a warning flag for bad weather conditions. And this is when we actually play out this message. So this is like the new one, which is actually very soon going to be live in the system. It's not looking too good out there. If you rather stay safe, dry and warm, why not find a driver or a car share instead? Obviously, there's also the other way around. If we know all this information, we can also know that the weather is awesome. And if you are someone that uses scooters quite often, then we just ask you, fancy some fresh air, the weather is looking lovely, why not take an e-scooter? Yeah, and then someone should press sounds good, then you directly are directed towards the scooter and bike tab and can see all the e-scooters around you. In this case, there wasn't that much around, but that's hopefully different now. Yeah, and rent this. So same thing, come on. User opens the app, weather looks good. We recommend the user to take a scooter or e-moped. And we can even go further. Based on how the users behave, we can actually just tell them that the weather is great and just take a scooter and go somewhere. And that is already it. So really nice use case, not massively complicated, but something we were actually quite happy with, and we will release to the users very, very soon.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Tim, you say very, very soon. Can you be a little more precise? Will it be in June, July, or?
Well, June, we have the 23rd. For some users, it might be. Okay. It will be in July. So main release will be in July.
But still, I think with a real release to the end customer, I think
Yes,
it's not only the first use case in the mobility data space. It's a first use case as well, reaching the end customer. From my point of view, it's really exciting because this is when real business starts, and that's exactly what it's about. It is about generating advantage, generating value for the customer, and as well being able to define business cases on that. And that's exactly what you're doing. So, Tim, very much appreciated. And I think we will have some time to discuss a little later. But first, great presentation. I think easy to understand, and that's exactly what we wanted to achieve. Now I would switch to Karl-Heinz Streibich, as I said earlier, the president of Achatech. And obviously, he was always asking very good questions, basically in why ask, and he was as well wanted to know exactly why should I use and why can I use IDS. And now obviously, he will explain us what is the background and basically why Achatech choose IDS for the mobility data space. Thank you very much. And Karl-Heinz Streibich, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Reinhold. Yes, the data space mobility, or the mobility data space, in German we call it Datenraum Mobilität, DRM, is a real breakthrough for Germany, for Europe, in respect of digital sovereignty. And this was also the starting point of all the activities. Next chart, please. We have developed 7-layer chart for digital sovereignty. Could you switch to the next chart, please? And in this 7-layer picture for digital sovereignty, we have proposed to the German government what should be done, what could they do to achieve a certain level of digital sovereignty for Germany and for Europe. And you see, it concludes a number of levels. And the major part, you see it, that we are focusing on today is European data spaces. And this is level number 5. And below that are the platforms, the applications, like, for example, Office 365, and 3 is the infrastructure, like the cloud databases and the cloud data platforms. And 2 is the Open RAN, what includes all the telecommunication equipment. And we focus on level 5. And this is what I would like to speak today. It was clear for the German government that we cannot challenge the hyperscalers on level 3, their cloud platforms, because each of them probably invests $1 billion per month. So, and also not on the applications, because the applications are well established. Search application by Google, the e-commerce by Amazon, and the Office application by Microsoft. So we have to start at a point where they all want to get to, and this is the possession and the management and the sovereignty in the data. Therefore, there is a German roundtable. It is called Concerted Activity for Mobility Providers. They are all German car manufacturers are there, and a lot more companies. And they have requested that we, Achatech, set up a program in establishing a data space for mobility, which is sovereign for Germany, sovereign and independent for Europe, and gives a common level playing field for everyone. So not more and not less, this was the task we got, and we got it as Achatech because Achatech is neutral. We are not allocated to a certain party. We are advising society and also the government on innovation requirements and on further technological evolution for Germany and Europe. Next chart, please. And it was clear when you look, the hyperscaler versus a sovereign European data space. On the left side, you see the hyperscalers, on the right side, European sovereign data spaces. Who owns the data? The hyperscalers on the one side and the mobility provider, the data owners on the other side. Then where is the data stored? It's centrally stored with the hyperscalers, but it remains within the data providers in the European sovereign data space. Which law applies? The jurisdiction of the hyperscalers, and in our case, it is the EU legislation and only this. Then who controls the data spaces? The hyperscalers in their case, and it is the data owners on the other side. So this is the basic difference. This is the fundamental difference between what we do as European sovereign data space providers and what the hyperscalers do when they act as the data providers. Next chart, please. And this was the first chart we have drawn in respect of what does the ecosystem look like. And when you just focus on the middle part, for me it was crystal clear. A lot of attempts happened in the last 5-6 years, and they all failed. Why? Because they all had been subjective. They all had been a party. They all had their own interests. That was one reason. And the other reason was that there was no top political intent to achieve digital sovereignty. And then we knew we had 1.5 years' time to build up such a data space for Europe. Starting in Germany, and the IDSA, this big congress in Hamburg in Q4, is the launch event. And we started mid last year. So it was clear that we had to build on what is already there. That means we had to stand on shoulders of giants. The first giant I have approached was the international data space. And if international data space would have not existed, we had to invent it. Because the international data space is exactly what we need. And it is open source. It is a federal, distributed data architecture with standardized connectors and with those 6 core functions inside, like the data dictionary and all the others that Reinhold has already mentioned. So this was a gift from heaven for us that this already exists. So thank you very much, Reinhold and team and the IDSA, that you exist, because this is the giant we stand on shoulders to achieve what we do. Then we had to bring on one table 2 parties which have not been really friends. And one is the public traffic authorities, and the other is the car manufacturers, the car manufacturing suppliers. And we achieved to bring them on one table. And the major means to achieve that was there is a mobility data room already in Germany since 10 years in the Ministry of Transport, Digital Infrastructure, BMVI. And we use their MDM as a concentrator for all the traffic requirements in the public transportation space. And in the private transportation space, we used here for 2 major reasons. One, all major car manufacturers in Germany and also suppliers are shareholders of here. So we got them buy-in in that program by using here. And second, here has a map. And this map is even more precise than Google Maps. That means we have really 2 big things at one stroke, and that is that we have a map standard for Europe and as a major user interface, and that we have all those car manufacturers and suppliers on the other side. So getting them on board was a breakthrough by getting the buy-in of all the mobility data owners in Germany. And on the left side, you see all the brands which are already there, Daimler and BMW and all the others. They are also shareholders, you know, of the data space. We have about 10 shareholders there. Next page, please. And then we have, you know, we have big working groups, work teams. I don't want to bore you with details. But what we have achieved is we have achieved breakthroughs on major obstacles for data rooms and data handling in the past. One is we have one data exchange standard. Second, we have the okay in respect of the Datenschutzgrundverordnung, that's the data privacy regulation for Europe, 100% conformity. The antitrust conformity is there. And you can imagine all car manufacturers are in there. You know? I mean, there are whole industries in there. Then we have a standard participant contract, very easy to buy in for Europe. And we have conformity to the Data Governance Act, which is key. And we have the data room based on IDS, which is data governance conform. And what we also have done is the governance body, it's a non-profit GmbH, is also established. And we have a concept for a private service provider who is providing services then to operate the data space. So that means the added value remains in Europe. You know, there have been a long discussion in the past. How do we achieve in Europe that the digital hyperscalers are also participating in tax payment? I mean, here with the data, the value added created, therefore the revenue and therefore the tax and everything remains where the service provider is. And we are much faster than the hyperscalers with the data room. Why? Because we are a collaboration of the data owner, thousands of data owners. And no hyperscaler in the world is able to make thousands of deals with every single data owner. We have them on board. And we have the public support. The German government is supporting it. We have liaised with the EU. We have the whole community, the mobility community there, and we built all that on the IDS concept of a data space. Next chart, please. And with this, we have, I close the circle. This is where Reinhold Achatz has also included in his presentation. This is the major picture we show. And here you see all big names and brands who are all participating. Some of them, 10 of them, are also shareholders. And you see inside the box the core functions. Release 2 of that will be available now in July or August. And you see we have the use cases, B2B use cases, B2C use cases for the end user on the right side, for the service providers on the other side. But most important of that is that everyone participates. There is not one, not a person, not an institution who says, I do not participate. That means everyone involved in mobility in Germany and later in Europe participating, and all that, I think, is also a breakthrough for the IDS vision, strategy, and the execution. And the execution is the IDS data space. Therefore, I would like to say thank you to the IDSA organization for doing all this groundwork. That would have not existed, we would have not succeeded. You have provided the groundwork that Europe can become sovereign for the digital age. And that is absolutely key, that we are not just a colony of someone else, but that we are what we are today. We are major economic source and force in the world. You know, Europe is the biggest, is the biggest economic area in the world beside China and beside the United States, and that we can also succeed in the digital world, in the digital age, is our goal. Thank you to you. Thanks for participating in this session.
No,
I get back to you.
yeah, no, thank you very much, Karl-Heinz. Really, this means a lot to us, what you're saying. Thank you very much appreciated. And I think what we do is, on one hand, yes, and we have a lot of participants in the mobility data space, but I think what you need as well is basically to get more even traffic on board and more economy of scale. You need a community. And this is now what Chris Langdon and Sebastian Pretzsch will talk about. And I will welcome with this Sebastian on stage. Sebastian is working for Fraunhofer and is very instrumental in the implementation of the mobility data space. So welcome, Sebastian, and I hand over to you, Chris and Sebastian, to talk about the mobility community. Thank you.
Great curveball. Let me grab it right away and let me share the screen.
Yeah, thank you.
So do you see my screen?
Yes, but not in the presentation mode. No.
Notice.
Now it's perfect.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Chris Langdon, and I'm happy actually to be here today with Sebastian Pretzsch. I'm very grateful and humbled to be here today next to those mobility pioneers here. So thanks particularly to IDSA and to Reinhold for having us. And then also, thank you, Karl-Heinz, and also Tim, for the new weather feature in your app, because I am indeed a nearly daily user of this. So I live in Berlin, and in Berlin I have no car. I really rely on intermodal mobility here. So I use scooters, I use bicycles, and I can't wait actually to use that particular feature, because I can agree it's no fun actually to be in the rain on a scooter here, right? So I'm actually looking forward to this. So it'll have practical implications. So I'll be a beneficiary of the Datenraum Mobilität right away. So that is actually, I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, that's customer value, right?
Yeah, it's just, yeah, I can experience it, right? It's right there actually, and it's very, very useful. So that's a wonderful example there. So let me link over to the mobility here, and that's also picking up on Karl-Heinz, who said, everybody, all of us, the more the better, essentially, right? And that in essence actually is already the big tagline of what we try to do here, right? So what is it? Who does it? Why now? And how can we possibly create any value here, right? So today we're very, very happy here to announce that IDSA will launch its mobility community. And this would not have been possible without 5 supporters. By regulation, it takes 5 supporters. It would even more than 5. We have Orbiter, Fireware, Telecom, TNO, Volkswagen, and others have all been supporting this. And IDSA has already created a new website. And who is doing it? It's Sebastian and myself. We will actually be, pushing it, getting it started. This new community. Now you will ask, why and why now, right? The why is clearly what we see is all around us is mobility is on fire, right? And this new mobility, future mobility, or next mobility, different words for this, it just needs data. It feeds on data, is enabled by data. And data, we've learned before, and we can say that from practical experience, right? Because so many great concepts like intermodal, true intermodal, seamless A to B across competing providers is just stuck. It is stuck without the ability to trustfully share data on customers. So the data needs a federated technology, and that is exactly what IDS can deliver. And just give you a brief overview of the projects that we're currently involved in. A lot of the projects, I'm involved in, and Sebastian is involved in this, and Deutsche Telekom has been a pioneer in that particular field when involved in NPM. We take ideas out of NPM and we put them to test in the real live lab in the city of Hamburg. Results will be presented at the 2021 ITS World Congress. We're also involved in Gaia X in the German hub. We are involved in their funding projects and white papers. Sebastian has been a pioneer actually with a government-funded project, Mobility Data Space, the technology foundation project of it. We're also involved in Achatech DM. We're grateful that we can be of help, support there. We also provide use cases, and we've been able actually to also now move the national access point for mobility, move it onto a new platform, a platform that has IDS built in. and it'll be an anchor tenant, so to speak, to the acatech Datenmobilität. And lately, we've been really actively involved in an industry-led initiative called Catena X, where the German auto business has come together in order to do what? Build data spaces, right? So it's on fire. So hence the timing couldn't be better actually to start now. Use the momentum now, spread it and get more people actually to join it in order to provide the data to make it a rich data experience. And how do we envision to create data? Well, we want to make it simpler, right? You want to be really valuable. And what we discussed are essentially two initiatives. The one is we want to write about it too, and it's an opportunity where we invite the community to come to us, share ideas, and the way we want to provide a platform is through some anthology. So it's a living document, a handbook, an encyclopedia, so to speak, where we can share use cases, ideas. That is one. And I can elaborate a little bit on this one. We already have started with it. We got very prominent contributors coming from the German automobility space. The Center of Automotive Management is involved in it. Consulting companies are involved in it. And we also already linking out to other European parties, such as KPN, such as TNO, and more is to come of that. And another big thrust, and staying in the spirit of how we see the community is actually doing something. And the key initiative will be actually about internationalization. And let me actually hand over to Sebastian actually to elaborate on that one. Sebastian.
Yeah. Okay. Some words about our internationalization plan. So we have already spoken to some of the IDSA hubs that you might know that are led also from some research institutions like VTT, CERT, or TNO. And we see that mobility activities are going on there as well. And we want to spread the good message from Germany and to transfer our knowledge to their countries, to their initiatives. So our plan is to invite and leverage, first of all, the IDSA hubs and our partners there in order to enable mobility data space initiatives in the other European countries. Another thing that Reinhold already talked about is the European data strategy, explicitly fostering domain-specific data spaces, such as a common European mobility data space. What we also see here is that there will be funding for the implementation of these data spaces. And as you have heard, the core functions, the core components of IDS are open source, and they need continuous development. So we are here looking for further funding, and invite you all for participating in research and development projects, not only for core functions, but also for setting up new use cases, enabling more partners in participating in mobility data spaces. Chris.
Yeah. That's it. And let me just briefly summarize it again. So this is about doing things, right? There's a platform actually to do good things and then actually talk about it. That's the anthology. And that you've just heard, it's also about the money, right? Sebastian has been talking about money. So here it is. So that's what we can offer. Is there anything better that we can possibly do into the community? Question mark. Well, thank you very much. And let me hand it back to Reinhold then.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much, Sebastian. I think really exciting to hear about your activity, because obviously we need a community, we need more support, we need more participants, and basically what I expect will happen, we will build up an ecosystem. And with this, I would like to come to the discussion, and I would like to ask some questions. Obviously, we are as well open to questions from the audience. But I think before I ask my question, I really show one slide. And basically, this one slide basically shows the organization of the IDS, to be precise, the mobility data space. And the mobility data space shows there's a governance organization, and this governance organization is built by Acatech, and Acatech formed basically the organization, a not-for-profit organization, who is really running it as a governance organization. And Acatech is identifying technical operator as we speak to really support the participants. So it's a very simple structure. And I think the next question will go to Karl-Heinz Streibich, basically where we'll ask him, I think as discussed, several data spaces will be defined next year and in the next years. And Acatech is playing obviously an important role today in the mobility data space. And my question to Acatech basically is, would Acatech be ready to have a similar way of supporting it, a similar function in future data spaces as it basically has in the mobility data space? Because without Acatech, we wouldn't be where we are today. Karl-Heinz.
Thank you very much for this question, Reinhold. You are absolutely right. The breakthrough was that we had, on one side, the IDS architecture, as I have mentioned. But on the other side, it was also that we had with Acatech a neutral, 100% objective organization, not being biased towards one or the other party. In this asset, which is financed by the German government, but also by the 16 states in Germany, but also by the private companies in Germany, this setup is perfect, to run the governance for data spaces, and also to, at the end of the day, outsource then the operation to a party which is the best possible party, and not a party because they are already linked to A, B, C, or D. And therefore, yes, we are asked that we take this function, as the governance body, the Trägergesellschaft, and that we administer the team of participants, but also the shareholders, of these data spaces. Yes, this is our plan, that we help other data spaces in a non-profit way, to establish itself on a European basis. And we can provide speed, neutrality, and a blueprint that we have done for the mobility data space, which then can be used also for the other data spaces.
Thank you very much, Karl-Heinz. A great answer. And basically, I think this is an opportunity because I know how difficult it is in the beginning to form organizations, to form basically the right organizational structure. And obviously, Acatech gained a lot of experience now in this last months in really how to set it up, how to as well communicate to governments, which is obviously definitely relevant. And I think you're smiling. I know there's a lot of your work, and really very, very much appreciated what you did here for us in that respect as well, to talk even to the Chancellor Merkel and all the other people in this part, which was not easy, but I think a great job and very helpful for all of us. I think when we basically talk about data spaces, I think as we are now at the IDSA summit, I definitely would like to talk about services and service opportunities as well, because obviously what we have so far is basically we are talking about offering software and database services. And this is basically creating opportunities for many members of IDSA because either IDSA members could be become a service provider based on data, because obviously the data are available in the data space, and similar to what Tim showed us, basically they can do similar things and basically create, again, value for the customer. And the most important thing, obviously, they have to have in mind is that there's a business model, there's a value created, and Tim described it in a very positive way. By the way, the other services we need as well in the mobility data space and all other data spaces are services to enable participants, to enable partners to work in a data space, because not everybody is able to do that on their own. There are many organizations which need help, and this help could be done provided as a service. So the message to all participants of the summit and to everybody in the world, we need partners, we need services which basically are based on IDS technology, but can enable a lot of additional things we can imagine. But talking with Tim and about Tim, basically I will ask him, obviously you have the first use case now, and you will be the first having it live for the end user. What are your future plans? I'm sure you have plans, you have something in mind which will be coming for your users as well.
The answer is quite easy. I mean, I'm the vice president for data, so that means data as I can get the best this is, right? So, I mean, we started with weather. For us, there's a lot more stuff that might be interesting, like traffic problems, like public transport information, and especially their public transport disturbances. And the interesting thing in the data spaces for us is, if you work in the mobility industry and like a retailer like ourselves, you work in very many different markets, right? And if you look, for example, at public transport, that's always my favorite example why we need these kind of things. There are cities that have very good APIs and interfaces to work with. There are cities that have bad ones. There are cities that have none. The biggest problem is we are available in 150 cities. So if I want to provide such a feature to my customers, I want to do this in all the cities. I don't want to start in Berlin, then do Hamburg 1 year later. And when something in the API changes, I have to update all of this. No, the idea is really we need common interfaces. And this is actually something the data space provides, which is the awesome thing about it. So for us, it's really one data source with the similar data interface, and then we can give it to everyone. That's the big thing. So I'm waiting for the next use cases, and I think we talked about the disturbances already, so there will be more for sure.
Very good.
Europe. That's the other thing. So
exactly.
We are there everywhere.
Exactly. No, Tim, this is exactly the right words, and I thank you very much for that as well. Because, being more active, not only in Germany, outside of Germany as well, is highly relevant. Because obviously, mobility does not end at the borders of Germany. Maybe in the moment a little because of COVID, but this will change again. And then we basically, when we travel Europe-wide, we definitely need data exchange Europe-wide. We need data and information and services Europe-wide. I think the other one who's really helping us a lot was Fraunhofer. Fraunhofer is very instrumental in developing features for IDSA and defining features for IDSA, as well as obviously doing the first implementation in the mobility data space, and obviously in previous activities as well. Sebastian, what do you think? What is Fraunhofer's next big thing you plan in the mobility arena? What can we expect from you in your organization?
I think our important mission is at the moment that we bring the core services and the core components into a live operation, into a stable state in order to create value, right? So, but at a certain point, I hope that IDS will become invisible for a data space, because it's only a technical foundation, right? What a data space mobility should be about is the data itself, right? About mobility, about new applications and services. So we see our role and our future in supporting the mobility ecosystem, and also by, of course, providing services on the data, but on a more sophisticated level, like AI, data management, etc. So we hope to support the use cases more intense on the technical side, and to provide more insightful services, right?
Great. We're looking forward to that. And my last question will go to Chris. And I know Chris is a very international person. You are traveling between the US and Europe and many other places as far as the pandemic allows. And Chris, what is your perspective on international context and data spaces in international context? And when we talk international context, obviously, we're not talking only about mobility. I think we're talking about maybe Catena-X as well, and maybe other activities as well, including Gaia-X or fireware. I think in your previous session you were talking with Ulrich. So obviously there might be a lot of activities we can do together between those organizations in future.
Yeah, very simple. For one, I would love to get involved, of course, right? I also live in the US there, so it would come naturally to do it. But I do think it makes, the most sense, right? If you look at technologies, you do need actually a global footprint, ultimately to be successful for this. And I don't have any solutions. I try to keep it simple. Maybe there are two things that, from my perspective, would be required, kind of, right? I think it would take like a push and a pull approach, a yin and yang, call it like that. So the push would probably be about us going out there, advertising, talk good about it, right? And we can use our community already to do that, right? And there are already hubs, there are other activities, Fraunhofer, I know, is international universities. So call it more traditional marketing, so to speak. But I think what is required too is a pull, right? We got to be pulled, and picking up on your comment, actually, Catena would be a fantastic example, or in general, to say use existing projects in order to create pull. Catena is excellent because the auto business is a global business, right? All the German automakers are involved in Catena. Their supply chains are global, right? Period, right? So in order to make it work for them, a particular use case cannot be limited to a German or even pan-European footprint. It has to go global in essence, right? So they're tier ones too. They have global operations, right? So I think that would be a wonderful opportunity to combine the both, right? To create the pull, implement use cases, get them interaction, roll it out in the supply chain, and that will then quite automatically generate interest and make them more accessible to our messages. So in a nutshell, that's how I can see those two components, the push, the yin and yang component, in order to get it out. But I do agree with you that it gotta be an international footprint. But yeah, I'm very hopeful that that can be accomplished.
Great, Chris. And as we are talking, it comes to the top of my mind. Basically, I'm presenting from time to time in Berkeley, California, at the Haas Business School, and obviously they put me in contact as well to Salesforce, and Salesforce put me in contact to the city government of San Francisco. And basically, the two of us may approach the city government and maybe give them an update on international data spaces and specifically on mobility data space, and maybe we create the first American version of the mobility data space together. Maybe let's talk about it offline, obviously.
I bring the beach. You bring the drinks, right?
Okay, very, very good. Sounds great to me. But I think unfortunately time is over. Karl-Heinz, you had a comment in the chat. You basically mentioned Mr. Tomczak, basically that he will be the partner to talk to on data spaces, correct?
Yes, it's for everyone who wants to have further information. I have been asked for a number of questions regarding the information on, on several aspects of the MDS. So if someone wants to know more about it, liaise with us, please contact Mr. Tomczak.
Very good. Thank you very much. And on the other hand, to all of us, because we are guiding them to Mr. Tomczak and to Acatech, because as I said, we are closely cooperating anyway. Unfortunately, the time is over now. I really thank everybody very much. Tim, for your great description of the use case, Chris and Sebastian for describing the community, and Karl-Heinz, really thank you very much again to Acatech and to you personally for all your support for the activity. We wouldn't be where we are without all that. And I think with this, I think I can hand back to Lars. I think as soon as Lars is there. If not, we continue to talk. Now, unfortunately, it's coming up, Lars.
I'm happy to have you answering one or two more questions. So
yeah, maybe we address one question which I could see in the chat, and this was basically about healthcare data space. Basically, and obviously from my point of view, as we talk about possible future data spaces, healthcare would be a very relevant topic. And basically, we talk to people in Finland, we talk to people in Estonia, and obviously Andre Nemat from the board of International Data Space Association is taking here the lead. So if you are interested in forming a healthcare data space, you are not alone. There are in Germany, there are a lot of activities. There are activities Europe-wide already with some strengths in Finland, in Estonia. So feel free to contact Andre or to contact me or to contact Lars, we will point you to the right direction. Basically, yes, there are activities, and we're happy to help you to set it up because, as it stated earlier, data spaces will be the future, and healthcare is obviously very relevant to us. Like mobility, it really is a personal value which will be created in mobility, in healthcare. Those are the things where we really the people feel immediately. So thank you very much for giving me the time to address that as well. But now back to you.
Yeah, thanks all of you. Well, if any question is left open, why mobility domain is really the trailblazer for data spaces, well, I would not understand it. So that was a great ride through mobility domain, and I think a great inspiration. And I think, and that is what we witness everywhere on European level in Gaia-X, the mobility data space, this is the go-to place and the best in breed example how data spaces should be built. It is obviously regarding the chat inspiration for other data spaces, and therefore we all can be glad that you did this pioneering work. And for IDSA, I can say thank you so much for all the nice and kind words. We have done a lot in the last years, and we are more than happy to see this all flourishing perfectly in Datenraummobilität. Thank you so much. Well, let's stay tuned. It's really a pleasure to see this grow. Thank you for your commitment and your contribution.